Well, then thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call the, what day is it? May 9th, meeting of the BFRW Standing Committee to order. If we can take a roll call.
Roger Hariga.
I'm here.
Todd Baberther.
Here.
Dan Young. Angela Hopt.
Here.
Katie Sheehan. So we do have a quorum.
Did you call Tom Handy?
So we may have a one discrepancy in here. I don't recall. Did we get Tom appointed to this group at the last council meeting?
I was on the list.
Okay, then our roll call sheet just didn't get updated after that meeting. So we'll add you in there, Tom, and then we're sitting with a quorum still with that one.
Dustin, do you recall, just for everybody, there are now 5 members? Tom was the only add, so, oh, I'm sorry.
That'd be 6 members
6.
with Tom on there.
Yeah, okay, all right. So the only one that's not here is Dan, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
One.
Okay.
Katie.
And Katie Sheehan.
Oh, Dan and Katie, right. Okay. Are there any members of the public present that would like to introduce themselves? I actually don't see anybody from the public on.
So we're running a little bit different here. We're running more like the council meetings where we have the panelists and the attendees. And so if you're looking at the participants list, there should be 2 columns for you to get in there. And we do have 5 hands up. And so I'll start clicking them on. And the first up there is Tim Atterbury.
Tim Atterbury, excuse me, Tim Atterbury, Associated General Contractors of Washington.
And then next we have Patrick Hanks.
Yes, this is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. Thank you.
And then Ariel Brenner.
Hi, Ariel Brenner with the New Buildings Institute.
And Corey Shaw.
Hi, Corey Shaw, Washington Aggregate and Concrete Association.
And Kathleen Petrie.
Hi, Kathleen Petrie, King County. Thank you very much.
And then I got one more, Amy Lewis. Oh, sorry, Amy. Now you should be able to talk.
Thank you. Amy Lewis, New Buildings Institute.
And then that's all the hands we have for the moment.
All right, thank you, everybody. And now I can see the 2 lists now that I understand the way we're operating. Agenda item number 2, review and approve the agenda. Could I have a motion?
How to move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Is there any discussion? I will let everybody know there is one question that has come over from the MVPE committee that we will at least present during other business. I'm not sure that we will take the time to debate it. And to be honest, I would need to do some investigating and myself. So there is a question out there. We'll at least introduce it under other business, and then whether it gets addressed next week's council meeting or at our next meeting, we'll figure that out. So any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Oops, did I see a hand?
I was just going to mention, if Katie shows up, I think she might bring up something about the WUI code, but just.
Okay.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, hey, there you are.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah, if I'd love to get some feedback on the WUI code about what we talked about related to the last meeting at the council meeting. So if there's time, that would be great.
Okay. I will just make the comment. My hope and plan currently is to get through agenda item 4 and 5 and get those resolved today, hopefully. Agenda item 6. I think that we will have a fair amount of discussion, but I don't actually imagine that we're going to be voting on any final approved. So we will, I'll make sure that we kind of close off agenda item 6 with 15 or 20 minutes left so we can have some time for those other business items. Okay. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Can we review and approve the minutes from April 11th?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes. If we can jump right into agenda item number 4, static damper proposals, BP 1-115. And is Eric Vandermeer on? I should know that.
Eric he's rejoining as a panelist. So Eric, I'm prepared to share the Word document, but if you would like to drive that screen, you should have the capability to share the screen if you want to do that. Just let me know what works best for you.
And if I can make a comment, Eric has very graciously worked with a number of stakeholders, several times has felt like, okay, we've got all the comments and we're ready to move this along. At the last meeting, there were a couple of additional folks that had comments, and so Eric has once again pulled a meeting together, tried to listen to those comments, and the result of that is the proposal or the information that he will present at this point. So thank you, Eric, for your extra work.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Eric Vandermeer with Delta E Consulting, the proponent for this proposal. I'll share my screen here, see if it goes. Okay. So as was stated, yeah, we did have a group that met last week and reviewed changes. We also reviewed, I reviewed offline and then circulated some other additional information that we found based on changes for the 2024 code that are planned at for the 2027 IECC. And so we are recommending making some pretty substantial changes to this proposal based on the group that met and based on the 2027 changes that have now gone through the committees at the ICC level. So the items in red that you'll see are the content that was before the last meeting, and then the content in blue is changes that were made since that meeting. So the static dampers section we talked about covers both fire dampers and ceiling radiation dampers. This is where we had all these control options that we talked about last time previously. And the group's recommendation was to move those out of this section and into the section that's only applies to the ceiling radiation dampers for the membrane penetrations in a rated floor ceiling assembly. And we just the group wanted to provide a pointer to that section to provide awareness between these two sections. And the reasoning for that was they didn't want these provisions to necessarily apply to fire dampers. Fire dampers, there's many manufacturers that make both static fire dampers and dynamic fire dampers. And so the group wanted these clarifications for shutdown to only apply to the static ceiling radiation dampers. And so we'll see what that, we'll look at these in a second. So that would be in blue here, this is would be a Washington State clarification. And so then jumping down to the ceiling radiation dampers section of the code. So this applies to rated floor ceiling assemblies and how you protect membrane penetrations. And so you have options to either use the dynamic dampers or the static dampers. And so the change that's shown here in blue for the dynamic system, that's the proposed language that's the current language that's come out of the ICC committee for the 2027 IBC. So that's what we're proposing to move to for Washington State. So this is basically says the same thing, but they changed the language slightly. The ICC committee also added this exception under dynamic dampers that if you have a listed, like a small exhaust fan that has a built-in ceiling radiation damper, if that's listed as and been tested as a system, then there's an exception that you don't need to be labeled as a dynamic system. And so that's again matching the 2027 IMC language. So then the bulk of my proposal was to add these acceptable means for shutting down HVAC systems that have static ceiling radiation dampers. And so that really confusing language that's in the 2021 code and 2024 code is being revised by the IECC for the 2027. So instead of saying in the event of essentially the code language actually says not designed. I don't know how you can not design something, but that's what the code language actually says. And so we're getting rid of that confusing not designed language and changing this to say that static ceiling radiation dampers shall only be installed in systems that are automatically shut down in the event of a fire. And then we're adding in red, so that up to there would be matching the model code language for 2027. And then the 2027 code is now silent on acceptable means of shutdown. So there were 3 exceptions in the code to this section. Those are all 3 of those exceptions are being removed in the 2027 code. I don't know of any technology that meets exception 1 or exception 2. And exception 3 is possible, though it didn't make a lot of sense. So I'm in agreement that we should remove those 3 exceptions. And then, what we're recommending is adding the bulk of my proposal, which was so the 2027 code will still be silent on acceptable means of shutdowns for systems with static ceiling radiation dampers. And so we're recommending adding these 5 methods for how to shut down a system. So there's items 1, 2, and 3. The group didn't change any of those. Those are more for large central systems for bigger air handlers. There was the recommendation to add the fire sprinkler water flow, which would also be like a central type air handler system. And so we worked through that to get all that into model code language. And then the option that I was, working for these small energy recovery ventilators, how do we have a local way of shutting these down? So we worked through this language and we decided to limit this method of shutdown to systems that are 500 CFM or less. So this is if you have a small energy recovery ventilator or a small system, oftentimes we have, we see these used in multifamily apartment units where we have a single energy recovery ventilator per unit. I can kind of show you what this looks like, but oftentimes in a residential unit, we'll have a single energy recovery ventilator that we're actually installing in the floor ceiling assembly. And then we have these ceiling radiation dampers. So they're very small systems, somewhere between 50 and 150 CFM typically for these apartments. And so this provides the means for shutting down these small systems. Oops, excuse me. So we worked through this language. We're limiting that to small systems and to use these, we're calling them duct heat sensors. So to follow the fire code language, and we reviewed the temperature set points of this. So we think this is the group was in concurrence that this would be an acceptable means of shutdown for these small systems. And then there was Sean from the city of Seattle also wanted to add an exception to not having to shut down the system at all if you have fire sprinkler coverage in every space that the HVAC system serves. And so oftentimes, you know, these residential dwelling units, they're permitted if the bathrooms are 55 square foot or less, they don't have to have a sprinkler head in the bathrooms if they use the 15-minute thermal barrier as allowed by the fire code and NFPA 13. And so we limited this fire sprinkler coverage exception where you don't have to shut down the system at all to systems that are up to 2,000 CFM. So that was the language that was worked through there. And then we needed to add pointers to the International Fire Code. So I guess this language that we just reviewed would be both part of the building code and the mechanical code, because that's all the same language between those two. And then these pointers needed to be added to the International Fire Code for the exception that they were recommending adding. So that's a long explanation for what the group and subsequent discussions after we met last week landed on for code language for this.
Okay, Eric, I have one editorial potential question for you on 717.2.3 at the beginning.
717 point.
I am looking at it's right there. Right there. Static dampers. The word requirements with an S. As I was just looking at it, and I may be incorrect, but as I read it, trying to be code language, it is the requirement without the S of section 717 6.2.1.2. Then that requirement says there are options.
Okay.
I don't think it should be plural. I think it should be requirement. So that's all. Getting rid of one S is my only comment. Any other comments? Todd, I see you're unmuted. You're trying to raise your hand.
No, well, no, but I will comment. First of all, thank you, Eric, and I see Chris is on here and others. I listened in and really got a great education on their thought process on this. So thank you for this effort. I think it makes a lot of sense. It took me a while to wrap my head around it, but I think it's a very thoughtful approach to this issue. And that's it.
You muted, Roger.
Ken Burlett, I see your hand up. If I don't know what we have to do to.
He's good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good to go. Thanks. So I did talk to Sean Shepard yesterday because he did mention to me about the work that he worked with Eric on this. I guess my first general question that Sean couldn't answer was to Eric. Eric, are you seeing these in any other occupancy types other than Group R? That's my first question being installed.
Yeah, the majority of installations, I mean, the majority of building types that we see using, you know, rated floor ceiling rated floor ceiling assemblies and wood frame construction is, you know, apartment buildings. So it's a very common construction method. There are sometimes in the wood frame sections of those apartment buildings, there are amenity areas, you know, small that are out of the group R occupancies. Usually those aren't large enough to be A occupancies, but this would apply to other building types that use rated floor ceiling assemblies.
Okay, because that was what the exception is for the fire sprinkler coverage is kind of really pointing to R's only.
Yeah.
And I thought that if these were using other occupancy classifications, that maybe we need to fine tune that. The other issue is, let's say we have a non-sprinklered building that you're putting these in, if that's possible or not. And then would we allow just one sprinkler head in that area to be sufficient enough for that exception? Similar to what we might do like in a med gas room where we install one sprinkler head off the domestic lines in that med gas room. It wouldn't be a sprinkler system. It would just be, you know, a limited type thing off a domestic line. So I didn't know if we need to get into that much detail or not at this point, or it's something that we can fine tune later. But those are just the two things that I was trying to get answers from Sean and couldn't. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, so I guess we can look that language. When I went through and looked at the acceptable locations in the IFC where you can omit sprinklers, it's pretty limited, is my understanding. I'd have to go back and review that further. I guess the way it's written is it says where automatic fire sprinklers are provided in each space. So I'd assume that you'd have the ability to enforce the proper
I just don't
coverage.
know. Yeah, I just don't know if we need to put in the R occupancy stuff in that exception.
Okay.
You know, if they just have sprinkler coverage, great. They have it. I don't know if we need to put that in there because it's kind of confusing to me because I'm thinking then, oh, okay, well, this is, you know, only pertaining to R, and then would we be acceptable if they just had the one sprinkler head in a non-sprinklered building, in a space that had one of these dampers, bathroom or not a bathroom, but they had a, you know, static ceiling radiation damper, and they said, yeah, I'm gonna put a sprinkler here so I don't have to do the rest of this. I just didn't know if that was something that had been thought of or not. But that would just, I think it would work. I think the language that you have written here will work. It was just some of these issues that I thought might come up, but it doesn't sound like they're going to come up very often based on where you're saying these things are getting installed. But I just wanted to just say we might have to look at tweaking some code language next cycle.
I will comment, Ken. One still question I have is a little bit about process, or what I want to remind everybody. You know, what we're putting forward from this committee and then theoretically getting approved by the full council, then goes to CR 102. And there's the opportunity for comment, you know, public, it will be then open for public comment. So I think if that is, Ken, if that comes out of public comment, and I'm, you know, where is that line between what changes we can make during CR 102 and what we can't is not black and white. So
no, I think that's great, Roger. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we're pretty well covered as written. I think the majority of applications would be Group R. And so I think having this pointer to the thermal barrier section is helpful. You know, we've also limited this to small systems. And I don't think we want to over constrain it on or allow kind of additional exceptions for just one sprinkler here, head here or there, that they should have adequate fire sprinkler coverage for the space, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I would just tweak the language that says when the building is provided with an automatic sprinkler system.
Okay.
You know, something to that effect, that just tells me the entire building has to be covered, not just that space.
Okay. And thank you.
Then we'd have to say like, and
That makes sense, Ken.
Yep, yeah, and each space, yep. That would get out of the exception of just adding one sprinkler head.
Okay. If that's resolved, Angela, you're up next.
I wanted to go back to the first change that was made to the static sprinklers where he changed it from requirements to requirement. I think it should be plural. For code language, if you look at each of the numbered criteria, each of them has multiple requirements within them. And I think it's just kind of one of those that's just usually how the code reads. So I would change it back to requirements. Because the requirement is, duct smoke detection, but to do that, then there are a number of requirements on how you do that underneath it. That's kind of a semantics kind of thing.
Well,
what?
Angela is much more involved with exact code language than I, so I will defer to her. I didn't feel strongly about it. I was just trying to get it proper, so.
I think, normally it's kind of a plural when you have a list of things on how to achieve that one requirement, it kind of multiplies. And then this isn't specific to R, correct? Because I was kind of hearing that, but it's not. The only place that it actually specifies like R was in that one thing we were just discussing, right?
correct. Yeah, any of these shutdown methods could be used for any system, any building type with rated floor ceiling assemblies. And yeah, you have static ceiling radiation dampers. So none of these.
Okay. Yep. That's my clear. Okay. And so, and I do like that R, where you mention the location of the R dwelling unit, the bathrooms, because it does make it clear that they can't use the exemptions from using an R system versus the full 13. So yeah, I like that language in there. All right. That's all.
Thank you.
Ron?
So Eric, with the proposals at the ICC level for 27 and the one that you have posted in the document today, that strikes the exceptions, right? Just like you're doing here. Was that one approved, or is there a new one that I don't think it was approved, right? Can you just talk about the history of it a little bit?
Yeah, hold on, let me open up.
I mean, I'm not arguing the merits of it. I agree with you.
So this was a proposed submitted change. There were two changes. Then it went through the public hearing. And then let's see,
That was the committee action hearing. The public hearing hasn't happened yet.
Okay, yeah, so it went through the committee. So they essentially, it's gone through the committee. The committee has kind of combined what was in these two code change proposals into this recommended one proposal to move forward, I guess. So.
Okay.
Do you know, did this make it through the committee action hearing too? This only shows the committee action 1 disapproval. I'm not, did it get approved in the second one last September? Or, you know?
I'm not sure exactly. No, I guess I found this document online and
I'll look it up really quick.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying is FS 89 is a similar, a related proposal. And maybe that one's moving. Anyway, I'm not, by no means am I debating the merits of what you're doing there. I agree with that. So maybe it doesn't really matter.
I guess, yeah, FS 76 and 77 were both submitted.
I guess maybe the question should be, I think this is ready to move forward to file for rulemaking. And in that time, we'll kind of know a resolution on all of this too, I think. Is that a correct statement? So
That's my understanding.
yeah. But I don't think it matters, quite frankly. But I like some of the alignment you did with the code language.
Okay, I see no other hands up. Todd, your comment that you just made was something for me to, I have one question yet, and I would like, because Dan is not on in the meeting today, and we are adding those correlation pieces to the IFC. I think we're ready for a proposal to move this forward to the full council. And I would ask for that. And then Dustin, what I would like to do is to specifically reach out to Dan, who is fire code, and just make sure before the full council votes on it, which would be next week, he has the opportunity to specifically look at that and make sure that the references, he doesn't see something in the references. So
I can do that. So would the motion be to, I guess, ask for a motion that sends this to the council, but with some review from Dan as well prior to the council meeting?
I don't know that we have to have the request for Dan to review it. Yeah, officially in the motion. I think I would just ask you to, let's reach out specifically and make sure that he's had an opportunity to look at it and doesn't see anything. And if he does, we can address it at the full council meeting. I'm hoping that we don't need to do that, but. So as the chair, I can't make a motion. I don't think. So I would be looking for somebody to make a motion to move this along.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Tom. And Dustin, do you have the language? Or Tom, make a motion to move this along to full council with recommendation to move it in CR 102?
Yes.
And then I've been trying to make sure I have the edits made here today on the copy I have, but after we're done, Eric, could you just shoot this one over to me and I can make sure I have everything in here exact?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to work through this sentence. I don't think it's right. Where the building is provided with an auto.
What I did is I removed that word and it seemed to make the sentence work for me.
It seems to me, because it says sprinklers with an S. But Eric, if you're,
I think it's where the building is provided with an automatic fire sprinkler system. And each space where a ceiling damper is installed, or wait a second. Okay, so where
I don't know, what did I have before?
as a sprinkler and where a where sprinklers are located, just a second. Oh, yeah, it's with with an automatic fire sprinkler system, I believe.
Where the building is provided with
And
yeah,
and automatic fire system and where sprinklers are located in each space. I think that's what I'd have to say, yes.
I think we're fire sprinklers, I think. I mean, just
so, Tom, you made a motion. Angela, your comment, was that a second, or can I call it a
yeah, that's
second?
second. Yeah, that's fine. Second.
Tom, you're okay with the new improved version?
All good. Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for all your work. All right, we are on to agenda item number 5, which is the EV charging proposal. And because I offer appreciation for Eric for all of his hard work, I want to offer the same appreciation for Todd for all of his work on the EV charging proposal, pulling us into the current BFRW version. And I believe that that has been posted. And we have some comments. So Todd, I think what I would ask is for you to pull up the current working document and try to allow comments from, well, first go through any comments that you're aware of, I think, and then we'll leave it open to the public if there are additional comments that we can.
Okay, and I've been thinking about how to do this. I started bringing it over to ICC format, and I'm not sure that's necessary. We've posted the WAC format. That's the one that's been up for over a month now. And Dustin, if you have that Word document, maybe it's best are you able to live edit that if there are amendments today? Put you on the spot. You're muted, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. You don't have to pull it up this minute, but
Yeah, I'll get it while you're talking. I'll get it pulled up.
okay. And what I'm saying is that's the same as the PDF that's already posted of the BRFW version. And what I was mentioning is I started to bring it over to an ICC format, same content, so we could edit that, but I don't think it's necessary. Okay, so since last time, we've tried to work with a few people to get responses to this baseline. If you're tracking our process here, I think what we're proposing is technically the 3 proposals will be denied, so that we can work off of this more integrated committee draft. And I think, Roger, our intent today is, as we're going through and discussing this, is to make amendments if we want to edit and change anything in that draft. Is that kind of the intent today, Roger, as we talked? And then what I would say is we've had some feedback. Had a good conversation with Kathleen yesterday, one of the proponents on the I see you're on, or I think you're on here, Kathleen Petrie from King County. Patrick had submitted, Patrick Hanks from BIW submitted an email this week, but also one thing I didn't see posted was Patrick's petition 68 revision 2, which was we also reviewed last time. So we've been looking through that, and I think I had mentioned in a public meeting that there are a lot of great ideas in there, and there's substantial changes, and I'm not sure what the right vehicle, if we were to make that significant of a change. A lot of references and good proposal ideas on definition and so forth, but then also some exceptions that I think go beyond, in my opinion, the scope of what we've done in the original petition. So I'll just make that as a comment so we can start to go through that. And if we need to pull it up, we could do that. That's the purple document from last BFRW meeting. One thing I'll note in here,
Well,
go ahead.
if we can talk about process and I guess agree on the process.
Okay.
Moving forward, the version that we see on the screen was the version that my intention would be is that that's the version that we would move on to the console. But there's always conversations in TAG about these three proposals and combining them in some way. That's what we are doing. I believe you are correct. The proper way to do that is to deny the three proposals and move forward with the BFRW combined proposal. So perhaps that is an action the BFRW committee should take with a motion to deny those and specifically name this combined version in that motion. And we would then officially say, okay, this is the version we are now currently working with to move forward. And then we will start talking about amendments and modifications. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may, at the last meeting, we did make that motion. We did officially deny the three petitions that we had for the group one proposals, and included in that motion is an introduction of a BFRW proposal. So I think we're where you're intending to go already.
yeah. Well, then break that. I guess I could read through those minutes a little bit closer. So, all right. So Todd, I think that we've officially got the version up in front of us.
Okay.
How best do you want to go through the comments?
Well, I have a couple immediate catches that I'd like to propose here. So if we scroll down, catching everyone up, the red starts on the next page. So the main thrust here is that in the table 429.2, we changed the 25% of the EV ready to 10, and this is what we introduced last month, and the 10% on the EV capable to 40. If we scroll down, the other thing that I need to propose changing here, because it was my misunderstanding, and I want to make sure everyone weighs in on this, is in 429.3, I should not have crossed out and/or dedicated electrical equipment. I got comments that was the intent, that sometimes it's electrical rooms in the building, sometimes and more often it's dedicated equipment that could be external even to the building. I'd love comments on whether and/or is good code language, but I would propose that we remove that strikeout there and just keep the code as is. The and/or dedicate electrical equipment.
So Dustin, you're gonna make these changes as we go and just make sure you're coloring it something different so we have the opportunity. Hands are going up. So, Angela, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't believe and/or is good code language. I think it's just and.
And so, Angela, that is the current code language. So this could be an opportunity to clean it up. If
I would think so. I may have to do a search through my actual codes PDFs to see if and/or is actually used, because I think it should be and. Because if you have both of them, they should both be sized appropriately, which you could have two different. That would be my opinion on that one. But anyway, the dedicated, both those, the electrical room and the dedicated electrical equipment, those should both be included.
And Angela, if I may, the feedback I got was sometimes it's not an electrical room.
Right, and that's why I'm saying it should not have been crossed out. I'm agreeing.
Okay.
But sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is, and there's dedicated electrical equipment, and I think it's, yeah. And so Yeah, the and/or has me thrown a little bit, but if that's the current state code language, I'm not gonna fight it.
Okay. Patrick?
Yes, thank you. I was not aware that this was an unintended change. It has an incidental effect on in putting a lot of cost savings in because it removed the requirement to size all the electrical equipment for EV capable. And that was one of the huge concerns that we heard from our members, and one of the big cost problems is that they're having to size their electrical equipment with the utilities based on the EV capable, but they don't know what is going to end up being put in those EV capable conduits. It could be more than what we're currently doing now at the point that they need it. And then on top of that, if you combine that with the 40% increase, which before wasn't an issue because it was going to be a relatively minor cost increase without having to size the electrical equipment for that. But if you have to size for that 40%, that's going to be a substantial increase in cost. And so if we're going to put in back the and/or dedicated electrical equipment, I'm fine if you want to change the and/or. I agree that's probably not good code language, and I confirm with Todd that that's what the current code says. If we could remove the EV capable requirements from that, yes, there is a retrofit cost with that, but when we talk with our builders, they think it's better for some of those retrofit costs to happen later on when you know exactly what your demand is, what the sizing is going to be when you're putting in the actual wires and panels for that. Whereas doing it now adds in a really high cost.
Are you going to respond to that question? I have a question, but go
Okay,
ahead.
yes, I agree with Patrick, and this is probably what we need to work through. That was the intent of crossing it out, is that that you shouldn't have to size. That it's appropriate to size the building infrastructure for all three categories. But it perhaps should not include, and that's what the next section is trying to get to by crossing out EV capable, that you should not have to size the electrical equipment, the transformers, so forth. And so I think what I'm struggling with on what's highlighted there is how do you make sure that you have the right infrastructure in place that's not the electrical equipment. So maybe the words dedicated electrical equipment are just not appropriate. Is there a better way to capture space for that equipment and other needs? I don't know. Does someone have an idea, electrical rooms and areas or whatever, to accommodate the requirements of all those three categories? The feedback I got from a utility was that more often it's a dedicated service that doesn't have to be in the electric room. So how do we accommodate space for that in the future?
Todd, I don't have an answer. I have a question or a clarification that I think might be of value. As we went through the sizing of the modifications of the 10 and the 40, there was conversations about the 10 and then the 10 EV charging stations and the 10 EV ready is based on the numbers that we have that are in the next 5 or 10 years. And the 40 is looking out 20 or 25 years. Is that correct?
We were aligning it with 20-year horizon with the Northwest Power and Conservation Council power plan.
Okay. So then my question is, outside of what the language is, because I think we can correct the language, are we suggesting that the electrical equipment, so for that, in 20 years, when it is required that they activate the EV capable parking spaces, an owner, what is if the electrical room is not sized for it, you're suggesting, Todd, that the typical is at a separate, so does it have to go in the electrical room or not? I've heard that it wouldn't have to go in the electrical room. So I am almost wondering if it doesn't go in the electrical room, you have to find a place for it somewhere, right, for the separate equipment. I don't know that we as a code language need to tell them you have to find space for it or plan for it ahead of time. 20 years from now, if you're going to say, okay, you now need to activate the EV capable parking spaces, who knows what electrical, the systems are going to be available in 20 years. Ways that they can activate those spaces. Maybe there's this is way out in left field, maybe there's a small little nuclear device that's formed that goes in each charging station, and you don't even need the conduit. We don't know what that looks like. So I'm almost wondering, and again, outside of the language, what do we really feel like we need to require in the current code language for people to address the activation of the 40% EV capable in 20 years? And I would almost suggest that we could leave it unspecified. So I'll put that out there for contemplation. And Angela, your hand was up. I think let's continue the conversation. So go ahead.
Okay, so first, I think we discussed this last time, that the goal to get to, what is it, 0 emissions, whatever it is, does not necessarily depend 100% on EV vehicles. There are other types of vehicles. And so I think that 40% is high. I don't think we should be planning 20% or whatever, every 20 years out based on a single type of technology that we currently have personally. And then I agree with Patrick as far as I think his people, their concern isn't necessarily the size of the electrical room. I mean, that's whatever. Equipment is going to get smaller. It's not getting bigger to provide the same thing. Their problem is the equipment situation, where you're having to oversize supply and things like that for a what if situation that, like you said, is 20 years down the line. That's where it gets expensive. And I think absolutely that the EV capable spaces should be removed from basically, I would think, this paragraph. So the required EV charging stations, those are obviously fully in, equipment's mounted, everything. The EV ready parking spaces actually are wired and everything, just without the equipment, correct? Is that what I'm reading? So those would need to be sized for and things like that. But then the EV capable are basically a kind of maybe 10, 20 years down the line, the building will want to add more parking spaces, because I don't think it's the intent to ever have the code say, okay, all buildings with EV capable parking spaces, now we're triggering you to retroactively go do those. This all moves forward in this is all new construction. And so the capable are basically, if a building at some point wants to add more EV parking spaces, we're trying to make it easier and less expensive down the line, as far as what I'm understanding. So I guess the culmination of my comments is I think that the 40% is too high, and I think that the capable parking spaces should be removed from 429.3. Those would be my comments on it.
Todd, I see your hand up, but I'm sorry, Tom. Todd, do you want to respond? I actually, Angela, the 40%, I disagree with, and I will go ahead and say, based upon our discussion last time, we are mandated by the legislature to provide future, I don't have the exact language in front of me. Thank you, Dustin. Well, there's the electrical rooms. But where is the, yeah, 3A. The rules adopted must exceed specific minimum requirements under section 2 for all types of residential commercial buildings to the extent necessary to support the anticipated levels of zero emission vehicles. So.
Right, but that doesn't say electric vehicles. That says zero emissions vehicles. So basically what we're doing is we're saying that we're putting that 40% out as if the only option is EV, where that's not the only option for going towards zero emission. That would be my sort of take on it. So that's just where I'm at, because yeah, last time we discussed a number of, I don't remember exactly what they were, and I'm pretty sure it was like Micah was bringing up other options as far as zero emissions vehicles and moving towards those things. And so yeah, I just would caution about going overboard. But I guess if we're gonna have the 40%, what those are providing conduit and things like that, we're not saying they have to wire it. I would still remove them from the equipment room and equipment sizing, because there is no way to anticipate what will be needed. And if necessary, they could build another electrical room within the garage. I mean, things can be done that would be way less intrusive and cost intensive upfront than to have them size it for the number of spaces that this could involve.
I agree with your second comment. I don't agree with your first one. Based on EV is the only zero that is available today, zero emissions. You know, yes, who knows what would happen in the future, and we could modify it at that point. But currently, EV is the only zero emission that we have, and some people would argue that it is not zero emissions, but so we have those two questions to consider. Tom, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I totally agree too that we can't predict the future. We don't have the crystal ball. We don't know where technology is going. There's a lot of work, with hydrogen again, with the safer containment vessels. And, we just, if we were to put such a large requirement on these facilities, then that could potentially have absolutely no value, even in 10 years. I think that's just a mistake to require that now. I think we can build into, what we can see in the near term, as being a part of the code, but predicting out what might happen with vehicles in 20 years, I think is a mistake.
Okay. Todd, I think you're next.
Sure. The feedback I got, I shared from a utility is that don't specify that it has to be electric room. That's not typical, that the services are combined. The second one was from a couple developers that I trust. They were not concerned about the space requirements. But they just wanted clear that it's not the electrical equipment that's in the next section, the service, the transformers, the wires, everything like that's the investment they're concerned about, and understand that, that's not being capitalized. You're asking for an asset that can't be capitalized until a much future date. So maybe the hint is in the section above where it's described in EV capable, that it describes that a raceway has to terminate in a cabinet box or other enclosure. It's, in my opinion, 429.3 should simply be electric rooms or the area for those cabinet boxes are their enclosures. However, there's an elegant way to say that. That would be my recommendation as the intent of this section, not be very clear. It's not the electrical equipment. The statute is kind of, it says the electric room has to be, I mean, 20% for the first two categories if those exceed 20%, right? That's kind of given.
Wait, Todd, that confuses me because right now we are not exceeding 20%. If we make the change that we currently have, first two categories do not exceed 20%.
No, they do. 10 plus 10 is 20%.
It doesn't exceed 20%.
Oh, well,
Is
yeah,
20%.
I understand.
So I mean, that's, I think germane to the question we're having here is we're trying to figure out what, I think there are two questions. We're revisiting those percentages and then what equipment and sizing has to happen for each of the columns. And I will, the conversation about other options, I do, you know, the whole table is about electric vehicle charging. So talking about other, you know, zero emissions vehicles is kind of outside of this. And if they become viable, we would have to address them in the code. I'm assuming. So Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Todd, you really clarified some of my questions and comments. I get that, you know, planning for more electricity if we don't need it is a waste, but fuel cell vehicles are not ready yet. And that's looking out even further when we have electrical vehicles in the market at a pretty, and like accelerating in their terms of sales. So, you know, it's like, that's what we know is that they're in the market, they're popular, they're being sold. Whereas this other car is not. And so I get that, you know, once they are on the market, you know, then we deal with it. But for now, this is our mandate. And it's, the numbers are hard. I understand I don't want to, you know, just do more and more and more when we don't need to. But so anyway, it's tough. It's basically all I'm saying. Thanks.
I want to remind everybody, Dustin, if you can go down to, I believe it's the bottom of page 4. We have included right there, it's the tables. Sorry. Go up. These tables. So the legislature doesn't tell us how we're supposed to predict the EV, you know, like zero emissions vehicle percentages. Todd came up with the Northwest Power Council. I don't know what all of those letters stand for. Power plan. And in the electrification section in the bottom, it is their estimate of the percentage of EV stock. So not purchased that year, but the stock in each year. And in Washington, in 2030, which is what we're saying, we think that this code is projects built under this particular code are going to come online right around 2030. Maybe a year or two before, but the number that I see there is 19.4. So that's where the 20% is based on. The 2040, the 40 or 60% number, I guess, is 2045. Right, so that, you know, the 50, 60, the 10 plus 10 plus 40 is 60%. So we're basing that number on a 2045, which is another, you know, 15 years outside of, you know, is it a 20-year time, 20 years from today, but really by the time this code gets adopted and implemented and buildings come online under this code, it's about a 15-year lookout. So I just wanted to remind everybody that this was presented and I don't have any other numbers that are more accurate or make more sense to me to base our projections on. So, Angela, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna argue over the 40%. That's not a hill to die on because again, it's just running raceway and cabinets. That's fine. But as far as the other section, now that I'm actually now thinking about it, the electric room and equipment requirements for the required stations and the required ready are already handled in 429.2.1. That already tells you what you have to have in place, even for the ready parking spaces. So then the 429.3 is actually only affecting the capable parking spaces. So I guess I agree with it. Now I'm totally reversing way back to the beginning where I think the and/or dedicated electrical equipment should be crossed out. And that way you are just requiring basically space for the cabinets that you're required to put in. And so that's where I'm going.
But Angela, it still says EV capable. And so I'm kind of leaning towards crossing it out, but also crossing out EV capable. So
except that, so the electric room and dedicated equipment requirements are already stated in the 429.2.1. It already says you have to have a minimum 40 amperage dedicated blah 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 volt circuit. It shall be installed in both of those. The branch circuits shall terminate at the outlets, blah, blah, blah. So that already tells you what you have to have in place at the time of construction. And because I mean, you can't not have an electrical room or equipment that's big enough and put all this in. You're not going to get your electrical signed off. So, I mean, that section already seems to dictate what's required for those two that are required to have power in place and ready to go. Whereas then down here, the electrical room and equipment, this would seem to be only then applying to the EV capable parking spaces, which again, in that one, it says that the raceway has to terminate at cabinets or whatever. So I would say that then it would just be, you need to have a space for those cabinets in there. So yeah, I think, yeah, the dedicated electrical equipment should be, I think, removed because you've already got that in the actual requirements for the first two types, as far as I'm reading it. So it's the only question is when developers are saying, okay, but so what do I really, what's the minimum I have to provide for these capable parking spaces, which I may never use? And so basically it's saying you have to have these raceways and they have to terminate at the cabinets or a box or other enclosure. So I guess though, is that, now that I'm reading, okay, minimum volt circuit shall be installed for.
the termination language, and Todd, jump in if you're wanting to respond. The termination language is at the end of the space, is the cabinet box or other enclosure in close proximity to the proposed location of the space.
So that's not actually the electric where the raceway.
Right, it doesn't, the way I read 2.2, it does not comment on what happens at the other end of the conduit.
Right. And that's okay, that's where I was mixing it up. But so that's where I did, yeah, I almost see, yeah, okay, that whole section could go away. Because I mean, I absolutely don't think that they should be sizing the equipment for future what if. Put the 40% raceway in so that you can run the wires. But then again, I mean, if it's not telling you where it has to terminate, it's kind of up to them.
I think I might have a solution, Angela,
Okay.
if I may jump in.
Yeah, please.
Because what I had heartburn originally was it just said section 429. Maybe it wasn't far off if the section were to say electrical rooms or areas for electrical equipment shall be sized to accommodate the requirements of section 429, and then let's put in point 2. And that might solve it. Maybe get rid of all of the all required EV charging stations, so forth. Just go back to section 429, but put point 2 and make sure that it's talking about the rooms and the areas for the equipment.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
might meet the intent better.
Yeah. As long as the equipment itself is out.
Right. The areas for dedicated electrical equipment. Because that's what the utility was saying. Don't dictate that it's an electric room has to be sized for that, because most of the time we don't put it in an electric room in the same service as the building.
So Todd, you're suggesting electric rooms
Or
dedicated or areas for dedicated electric equipment.
correct.
That'll be sized.
And then get rid of all that stuff I put in there underlined and just say section 429, but add the point 2 that we're saying for that section that includes the table and those two 429.2.1 and 422.2.2. That solves it.
So, okay, I have a code question, but what you're suggesting is what they would currently have to do is the electrical rooms could be sized for the first 2 columns. But as long as they have an area where they know that they could put future equipment to activate the 3rd column.
Yep.
That's covered, and I would agree with that.
Because you got to terminate in capable, you have to terminate somewhere, so you're already planning for it.
Yeah.
It's just saying, do the obvious.
And then I was also wondering, correct language, Dustin is referring to 2.1 and 2.2, which I agree with. Okay.
And
We don't
Justin,
have
I
to
mean,
catch-
technically you're striking out. That
Yeah.
was, it's not in the code right now, so.
Okay. I think that works.
But you have to put the or, you have to cross out,
And
let's get rid of the and put or areas for dedicated electrical equipment.
yeah.
And we had a hand up in the attendees list.
Oh.
Eric, did you still want to maybe make a comment?
Sorry, I've been trying to monitor those. I didn't see it.
No, I think you're working through it, so I don't have a comment now.
Eric. Okay. Todd, we can continue to think about that one as we go through this.
I think it does it though.
I think it does too. I as I go back, there are, what do we want? What do we think is correct? In which I think we are all in agreement. And then how do we create the language to specify that? And I think that you're there. I'm curious. We spend a lot of time talking about the first paragraph, 29.3. The modifications that you have down below, do those still?
Yes, because this is the important part. Striking out EV capable means you're not making that investment in transformers and wires and so forth that you can't capitalize on right away.
Okay.
And I will say on the numbers, I'll just add this in it right now. The challenge we have is how do you create anticipated statewide, and let's just assume it's EV, because so the reference to Northwest Power and Conservation Council power plan is because that gives us a statewide forecast. And we are putting in the 5-year horizon, which better aligns with code cycle and investment, right? Financing of these projects, so forth, and the 20-year. Now, if the legislature would like to come and help us on that and dictate, that would be welcome. Or if they want to dictate the numbers, because they don't say which model and so forth. The thing is challenging is we also have the monthly, I think, or quarterly, I can't remember, spot check on actual adoption rates by county. But we don't adopt code by county, but the idea is get to the appropriate anticipated 5-year and then try to work through how local jurisdictions, if they need to bump up just for higher realized adoption rates. But right now, 10 plus 10 is well above, what we're seeing, which are under 10% in the state for now. So like King County is, I think it's 7 or 8. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And we're seeing that other jurisdictions could be 1 or 2%, right now. So, but we're mandated in that first category to be 10%, the statute says. Okay, I'll yield.
Yeah, just a second ago, Dustin had that raceway must terminate into a cabinet box or other enclosure. Is there any specificity to that? I mean, could a conduit just terminate into a 4-inch by 4-inch box and be called good, or how do you do that piece?
I am not an electrical, but yes, I think that the other enclosure would fit if there's a box. I can't see, Angela, I don't know if you have a comment.
Or a cap?
I was just gonna
Cap on the
say,
conduit?
I think that'll come down to electrical code. I mean, it's just specifying that it has to terminate somewhere, and if the electrical code has a size that empty conduit has to, but I think it's just so that there's a spot where you can access it, would be sort of, without it just being exposed, would be my look at it.
Hey, Dustin, if you're editing, areas 4 is new language.
Yeah, I was getting confused with all the different changes we had being shown there, so I'm trying to make it a little clear what the changes from current WAC are to what we're doing today.
I think you got it if you underlined and read that. Yep.
I'm going to raise another question that we are creating code that may be confusing, and that is related to 2.2. We're telling them where to stop the conduit. We're not telling them anything about where it started. And so I am wondering, and I'm not suggesting this is the right way. Should we say the raceway should begin at an area dedicated for future equipment and terminate, which would require people to say, okay, I've got this area over here that I think is going to be where I would put equipment for future. And you would run the conduit there, and in the future, if they want to change that area, I think they can, right? But we are telling them, if you think it's in the electrical room, great, that's where you start these conduits. If you think it's an area in the basement someplace, great, that's where you start the conduits. I think for us to be proper, we should say, right now, we're requiring that you put these in, start it here, end it here. So thoughts? Angela?
Yeah, I agree. That's why I was getting a little confused because I was thinking that the termination was actually there. But yeah, no, I think you're right, because otherwise, the conduit should start where they anticipate they would be close to electrical equipment to be able to run the wiring in that conduit. So yeah, I don't know how you want to say it, but I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't mean this to sound snarky, but this whole thing kind of reminds me of the Seattle off ramps off of I-5 that were built in the 60s, but that's all.
I drive those often, Tom, so I know what you're talking about. So can I suggest an edit Dustin, and I'm looking for anybody to help with this, but in the sentence that says the raceway, it's in the third line of 2.2. Make that the raceway shall begin at an area for dedicated future equipment, and terminate into a cabinet box or other enclosure in close proximity. Is that, I'm feel like I'm stumbling here, but
We have Eric, he might have the solution for us.
okay. Yes, Eric, thank you.
Not sure if I have a solution. Yeah, this is Eric Vandermeer with LT Consulting. I just want to note that there is a definition for EV capable that's in the current code. It doesn't look like it's part of this proposal. And if that definition isn't modified, then you would still have to size your whole electric service, is my understanding, for the 60% now, that the 10 plus the 10 plus the 40. So we'd be going from 45% in the current code up to 60% for sizing the electrical service, unless we modify that definition, because it says, yeah, you have to provide the conduit, electrical panel, and load capacity to support the future installation. So that definition would still govern even with all your pointers. So
Todd?
And I do want to say this is something Patrick, I know you're being quiet here, but Patrick was trying to address in his proposal, his revision. And I think you pulled some language from the Denver code, which I thought was good involving this. I don't know if we have that available. You might not even remember, Patrick, but it says under EV cable spaces, a continuous raceway or cable assembly shall be installed between an enclosure, end cap, or outlet located within close proximity of the EV capable space and future or existing panel board or switchboard locations. So that could start to get, I think, what you're asking there, Roger.
It does, and I would prefer to count on somebody, another code for code language rather than me writing it. So Todd, can you, I'm having to back up a little bit and understand changes to WAC language. Where is that definition? And if we, because I think what we are talking about is we would have to modify that definition.
So yes, the definitions in WAC 5150-0200, which is where all the Washington State modifications to definitions or additions of individual definitions are located.
So help me, Dustin. That's just chapter 2 of our, you're just saying we're gonna have to go up to chapter 2 and modify that, okay. So the proposal does need to include modification to chapter 2. Correct?
If we're considering making a change to this definition in relation, yes.
And I think what we have talked about anyway would require that. That would be a parking space provided with a conduit to support future installation of EV. So I think we will need to add that to the document up. Probably it's at the beginning. We modify chapter 2. I'm trying to go to it as well. 202. And then copy the electric vehicle and cross out. Oh, is it all of that?
Drop all of these in here just in case they become relevant as we talk.
Okay.
And then Patrick does have his hand up.
Yes, Patrick, I saw that. Go ahead.
Well, Roger said the code language I was gonna suggest to change the conduit or the EV cable definition. And then I was gonna suggest just go through, change what you want to change, and then at the very end, double check the definitions to make sure they're in line with
Okay.
the changes we're making. And you might want to include the automatic load management system up at the beginning, just in case. Double check that too. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Angela, go ahead.
Okay, so we were gonna change this electric vehicle capable parking space definition to something Patrick had done. Is that right? Or is this what it was?
No,
there was
it would, it would address the concern down in the definite description of a raceway. And I can walk you through it if we just want to do it on the fly.
I'm going to suggest we do it on the fly. I
Yep.
do be careful of time.
I don't know, Dustin, if you happen to have Patrick's, we can say it, or if you have Patrick's.
We're looking for the R2 that you were referencing earlier.
Yeah, yes.
Give me
068
one-
R2. Yeah.
Give me one moment.
Okay. Anybody remember that? It's in your comment, Patrick. I think that was from the Denver code.
The definitions, I think I mostly just pulled from the IECC. Unless
Yeah.
you're talking about something else.
Yeah, because I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that this load capacity to support future installation was being removed.
I think the definitions I have that might be because they're all kind of, they're a little bit larger of a change and they depend on each other. I think what Roger suggested would work too, where you just have it just say conduit and just take out the panel board
In the definition.
and the load capacity. So that's kind of like a scalpel change if you don't want to do a big rework.
And then Dustin, if you go down in Patrick's, keep going to the purple there. So 429.2.1 right there. No, keep going. Yeah. So he did a striker. So keep going down to
This one
420.
here.
Yeah, keep going down. There you go, right there. So you see right there that 429.2.1.1, that starts to get, I think what Roger, you're asking is language like that. A continuous raceway or cable assembly shall be installed between enclosure and cap or outlet located within proximity of the UV cable space and future or existing panel board.
That is exactly what, that language would do exactly what I think we should be saying where we expect this to begin and end.
So would it work to insert this sentence in place of the sentence where we're wordsmithing right now? So let me reject that change.
I'm glad something will be useful from all that code I wrote.
Well, Patrick, on that note, I do think it should be a bigger conversation to in coordination with the legislature to move more towards a structure like that. I think it's a heavy lift right here, but I think it is.
And I can propose a larger rework for the 2027 code cycle. It'll probably be more appropriate then, and let the tag go through it.
Okay. Now, Dustin, I want to make sure that we're.
Actually, Patrick, that's another way to say what I think it would be best in the tag to really go through that.
The last sentence that you have crossed out that starts with raceways, I don't think that sentence should be deleted. You know, that one, first sentence there should be deleted because you added it. But the raceways and related, the last sentence of the paragraph should remain.
Oh, I gotcha.
I think. Unless that's
correct. And I don't know, and I think when you're ready, I think you can also delete or cable assembly. I don't think we've define cable assembly anywhere. We just defined a raceway in the new language.
Since we're wordsmithing this part anyways, is it possible to include the end cap or enclosure in there? Because that's when I talked with an electrical engineer, they said that's one. It could be possible that somebody wouldn't want to have it terminate at a box, but just have an end cap on it. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like you already put that.
Well, I just did it after you made the statement, just so we could see it.
I'm fine with that.
Enclosure's in there twice now.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, enclosure, in cap, or outlet.
Does everyone agree those are the right terms?
You'll need to change the formatting on EV capable space to match what's in the current code.
Oh, good catch.
Probably need some capitals there on capable, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. Is defined terms, are they all capitalized? Okay, I'll
No,
I think it's just EV hyphen capital C capable. Is how you have it in the table.
Defined terms aren't capitalized when they're within text. They're just italicized.
okay. Thank you. So Todd, is there anything else? I think we need to go up and make the modification to the definition. You know, Dustin copied them up above.
Okay, as you're working through that, the only other thing I caught, if that's what you're asking, is at the bottom. I just make an editorial change to in the last section. We scroll down. Right there. I 429.4, it said 10 is spelled out there. Should we just change that to 10 so we're consistent? If our convention is anything over single digits is numerical, is that correct?
Usually it's the start of the sentence, and it's actually written out as.
Oh,
10.
so that's correct then, Eric?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay. My mistake. I didn't know that.
It's weird, but yeah, if it starts a sentence, they use the written out word, and if it's in the middle of the sentence, they use 10%. They switch, I believe.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that education. Okay, scratch that.
Sorry, I got distracted. So I think we do need to go up. Dustin, you copied all of those definitions up above. I believe the only one we're currently changing is the EV capable parking space. And we would delete the electrical panel and load capacity. Conduit to support future installation. I think maybe get rid of the comma too, but and then I think everything, that would be the only modifications to the. Although I agree with Patrick, we should go through and make sure that those align. Eric, your hand is up.
All right, I guess it left it up there.
Oh, okay.
Patrick raised his hand.
Patrick, go ahead.
I will say I do have a list of several things from our members of additional things to talk about putting in here. So when you want to talk about that, I can bring those up. But I did notice that under the automatic load management system definition, it only specifies EV ready, and I think the code language has it for EV ready and charging stations, so that should probably be changed.
So we should add that as part of this proposal?
Yeah, I think the code, the exception under, I think it's 429.3 says that it can be for charging stations and EV ready. Right? Just only say. No.
Sorry.
This is, I think, something I don't think, I think this is something that needs to be fixed. I think the intent is that automatic load management systems can be used for charging stations and EV ready, but the code is only saying for EV ready. And I feel like that doesn't make sense, because that's saying that you can use it for if you have panel boards, but once you put the equipment in, then you can't use it anymore. So that seems counterintuitive.
And so we need to change the definition and the exception as well?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
I think that's a great cleanup, so let's proceed with that. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna iterate, that would be a great cleanup to get clarified. Agree with the comments.
And so Patrick, can you just help me here?
So where it says EV ready, the automatic load management system may be used to adjust the maximum electrical capacity required for, I'd say, EV charging stations and EV ready. And then it'll also change it in the definition to match.
That looking,
I don't think we use a hyphen with EV charging stations.
and I could spell it better too.
I think wherever there's a hyphen, it should be removed. Also in the table headers, the hyphens should get removed. Very top of the table.
In all of these are not, shouldn't be hyphenated?
Yeah, it's not in the definition, right?
Down in 429.2.2, EV capable, is that hyphenated? Because it is in the title of that section. Got all sorts of errant dashes everywhere.
I think when I looked at this, I think some of the old model codes back in like 2020 had hyphens, but then they got changed. So now most other codes don't use hyphens. So I think we're stuck with basing on older model code, and now nobody uses hyphens for it.
So would it be a good cleanup for anywhere that we have the EV topic to not use hyphens in the language?
Well, they should be used consistently. So
Oh, yes.
either everywhere or nowhere is kind of what it is. Yeah. I think if you put this through Grammarly, it likes to put hyphens everywhere. So that could happen too. So yeah.
Gotcha.
If it's not in the definition, I'd say, yeah, remove it everywhere.
Okay.
And I'm gonna suggest if you could just make a note, Dustin, I mean, we're preparing this for CR 102, so coordinate the hyphens, the removal of hyphens to match the definitions.
And then Dustin, in the section you just added, I think you can just clean it up and say EV capable, right? I don't think you needed.
Down here?
Right, did we really need right there? Can't you just say EV capable? Do you really need electric vehicle, all that?
I think the intent was to include the defined term in there, but I'm open to just making it EV capable.
I think that's cleaner, but I'm not sure if I'm missing something.
I'm not sure that you can hyphenate it if you don't use the defined term. I mean, not hyphenate, italicize, sorry.
Do we need the defined term there?
Does-
Or do we just,
I
I
think,
mean, normally you try to use the defined term just so that it's obvious that if somebody's questioning what that is, they know they can go look.
okay.
okay, so again, looking at time, I guess we're okay yet, but Patrick, you have some other comments. I do think some of this editorial, Dustin, we can continue to clean that up. And you did still need to update the language on the first definition, whatever that was. So
Gotcha.
Kathleen, you have your hand up. I know Patrick has some comments. You want to comment on the work we've been doing here, or?
Yeah, thank you very much. Kathleen Petrie with King County. I will, if possible, I would like to please provide some comments after Patrick.
Okay, that's fine. Patrick, can you go ahead?
Yes, thank you. So, first off, I want to say, thank you to Todd and committee for all the work putting on this. Very supportive of the direction this is going, and I think we're making lots of really great changes. And I ran this by some of our members that build large multifamily buildings, and they viewed these changes very positively, particularly the changes to how EV capable works, as seeing that producing significant cost savings and improving the feasibility of projects. There's a few other things we think that could potentially be incorporated. Number one, this is heavily requested. I think it would be more difficult, but if the committee is open to it, we can figure out how to do it. And that's one of our builders is very concerned that because EV adoption rates can vary so largely across the state, that it's hard to set rates that apply statewide, when in some areas it just doesn't make a lot of sense for where their rates are now currently. So they were hoping to see if we could find a way to have rates be adjusted to maybe by the county level or something. And then possibly looking at making the transformer sizing so it doesn't have to be for simultaneously charging for all the spaces. I think right now that's what utilities are doing because they don't have good data on what charging behavior is. But if we're looking at 25 years down the line, it's possible that they could get a better idea of what charging behavior is, and it might not need that they have simultaneous charging. Because that's, I think, how it works typically right now. So they don't require you to plan that every single outlet in a building is going to get used at maximum, all the time. So if we could incorporate that, that might be a positive change. And then I'd say these next three things are ones that I think are easier to include and they're higher priority. Provide an exception for if the utility cannot provide 100% of the power for the requirements, that they allow, that they can figure out to do what the utility can meet and then convert the rest to EV capable. So if the utility said, we can't supply 10% charging stations and 10% EV ready, we can only do 5% for each of those, you do that 5%, and then you take that extra 10 and put it to EV capable. That's based off one issue I heard in Pierce County where PSE was saying that they couldn't supply the power for up to 2 years. And so the building was having delays because of that. And then next, clarifying that if a building exceeds one category, that it can count towards a lesser category. This was something I tried fixing in my revision too. Was I feel like the code's unclear. So if a building, let's say in King County, decided, hey, we want to do all EV, we want to do 50% charging stations, great. But under the current code, I think it would make it sound like they still have to put in EV ready and EV capable. So just making it clear that if they exceed a greater category, that it can count towards, charging stations can count towards EV ready, and EV ready can count towards EV capable. And then if we can allow R2 occupancies to calculate based off dwelling unit instead of parking spaces, I think that'd be really positive, because if R2 has more parking spaces than they have dwelling units, it's possible that these requirements can make it where they have to put in more EV charging or all across all three more spaces than they have dwelling units. And I feel like the intent is to more of basis so that there's, we're not going beyond a 1-to-1 ratio. So I think that'd be a positive change.
Okay. Kathleen, do you want to comment on those, or do you have other? I'm trying to figure out how we tackle.
And Roger, we do have a hand up in the attendees.
Oh, I lost it. Okay. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I think for the reason why the utility is taking the EV charging stations at 100% is because of the NEC and that it's a continuous load. So EV chargers are considered continuous load in the NEC. So that's why we're seeing that that interpretation of that load.
That was the second item. The transformer sizing doesn't have to be for simultaneously charging all spaces.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I guess I will start opening them up one by one, and I'll get comments from people. Patrick, the different doing rates by county or zip code. Correct me if I'm wrong, but currently the code, there's some things on the energy code where we do things on the east of the crest, west of the crest. I think that's defined in our code someplace. I'm not aware of anywhere else where we have statewide code language that has various by county. Yeah, it's requirements by county.
It's technically not in effect, but I think the WUI code would be an example of something where you have a mapping or something that can create different requirements based off, categories.
My opinion is that seems like a pretty big jump for us, trying to figure that out and incorporate that here. And even questions wise, I'm not sure, I struggle with doing that one. So that's my opinion. I'm gonna let others speak. Kathleen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. We would not be opposed to, for example, saying the top 10 most populous counties, including those. Or if you wanted to do, again, West Side would be required since it's the more populous portion of the state versus East Side. So just make the requirements specific to the West. We would be in support of
I struggle with how we would do it, but go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. I think, again, we don't have a model, and this is what we really need help with collectively. The 10 and the 40% is based off of some reference model that is also required by statute, which is the power plan, and that gets updated every 5 years. So the idea is that we can keep that in sync with every code cycle. So if someone had a model, that'd be great. The other reference we have are the immediate adoption rates that get changed every month, and I think it's by WashDOT, right? That's accessible, and that goes by county, but that's only a current spot check of where we are right now. It doesn't forecast, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. And even though all counties, I think, are below 10% right now, it doesn't matter because the mandate says that's the minimum we required, the 10%. So really we're talking about that second category there. And I just don't know how we would forecast right now, but I think we should talk to the legislature on those two, the 10% or the two categories, on whether they want to give more guidance on what we should be referencing. So thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Katie?
Yeah, I feel like more guidance from the legislature would be more appropriate than going down east-west side. That doesn't make sense to me. Population does, given that rural spaces have a lot further to go, and it seems like in urban areas, and which exist on the west and east side too, are more inclined towards using those EV cars. So yeah, I think that that suggestion, if, for example, King County wanted to up these numbers, they always could. This is the baseline that we have, and this is the data that we have. And I appreciate that that table is below this one that's on the screen, up with the kind of explaining why it's 10, 10, 40. Thanks.
Okay, Angela?
Yeah, I mean, this is residential code, which means that jurisdictions can't change it without coming to SBCC first for approval. But I think it's an interesting idea because I do feel bad when I'm doing, code stuff that the east side always gets lumped in with the west side. And, it's basically what the west side wants, the west side gets, and east side just kind of deals with it. So I think it's an interesting idea, but yeah, I think we would definitely need more direction from the legislature to do it, but I'd love to see somebody propose it and see what they say.
Yeah, and I'm glad you referenced the WUI code. And in that case, it's the legislature mandated that another state agency dictate the risk maps and the wildfire maps. And then our role and authority is to then respond to those maps. So it's an interesting, I think we should raise that question to the legislature on who and what could propose those forecasting models. We're also going to do it in a different way on the single exit because that will be by local adoption. And I think anticipating where that might go, that might be more like local zoning overlays where it applies. So good question. I don't know the answer. I don't think we have a model right now to reference. Thanks.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I appreciate you hearing me out on that. It was heavily requested by some of our members, and we're member-driven organization, so I wanted to bring it forward, and I'm glad I did. Good feedback. It sounds like it's something to maybe consider more for the 2027 code cycle and potentially legislatively, but I'll take that feedback and keep working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Your second item was transformer sizing, and Andrew responded that there is an NEC requirement. So I'm curious how we can respond to that. I am not sure, Patrick. I mean, I don't want to get into, I'm not sure we're the right person to talk about transformer sizing. I think that that's in electrical code. And I'm not sure where we would list that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's one where it's sort of a wish list item. If it doesn't make it this cycle, that's something I can
Okay.
do more research on and figure out how to go forward.
Okay. I was puzzled by the exception if utility cannot provide 100% of the power. I don't know what percentage of the overall power for a project that the EV charging is. My assumption is that is at a relatively small percentage of the overall power of the building. So I'm puzzled why it sounded to me both in your explanation that was something that happened in Pierce County, and if it is an isolated event or, but I don't necessarily want to write the whole code around an isolated event either. And I would, power supply, is something that needs to be, it is questionable at times when you can get power. I don't know that the EV charging is going to make a huge swing one way or the other. I wouldn't think. So my trying to make a change here to try to accommodate that. I'm not sure how we would do that or what it would make the most sense.
And then
So-
we have a hand up in the attendees again.
Okay.
And
I've got too many windows open. Andrew.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Andrew Blackwell with Delta E. The Seattle Electrical Code actually has an exception for a director's rule for this exact reason. And it's because we do see in our load calculations that the EV charging can significantly increase the service size of the electrical capacity. So you could have 800 amps for your meter centers, but then you have 800 amps for EV charging. So you've pretty much doubled your service size. So there's a director's rule for Seattle that allows Seattle City Light to say, we don't have the capacity in this area to add this amount of EV charging.
All right, I guess I'm looking for other comments then, and if that is. If it makes sense, number one, and if number two, how would we accommodate that and modifying this? Any other comments?
I'll raise my hand here.
Yeah.
I think that this whole section has always been challenging for the council because it, raises lots of questions on what is appropriate in the building code and so forth. Some of it we're being told we have to do, and getting too much overlap in dictating how utilities, provide service to customers is always been, kind of the really challenging topic. Because again, my understanding and learnings through this process is that don't assume that the service is coming through the building. Often it is a separate service altogether, depending on, and because I think my mind originally was always going at parking, structured parking as part of a building. And that's not always the case in this section of the code. So I guess I have struggled with that it's in there at all, dictating what size transformers are and so forth. But maybe there's precedent for it that others know a lot better than I do.
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, in the R2 version put in for my proposal, I have it not as an exception, but it's a under 429.1, and I pulled it from the IECC Appendix RE language regarding this. And I agree with what Andrew said. This can really increase the electrical requirements and loads for a building or a parking structure. And when you look at the scale of not just what we're increasing with EVs, but we're doing electrification of buildings, and then there's data centers, like utilities are just facing immense pressure on demand. And what I didn't want, particularly for Group R, is to have a case where, we have perfectly good housing that could get a certificate for occupancy, if not for just if there's a case where utility says we can't provide power to you in time for that. So trying to address that now so that we don't have any housing that's getting held up because we just need more supply. So if we can get that language included, I think it would be very helpful. And I'm hopefully it's not, a widespread issue. And I think the change to EV capable will help alleviate that pressure. But just making it so that there's, no housing projects that are going to be delayed if just for this reason.
I I agree with, I wouldn't want. I agree with the concept. I wouldn't want a project to not go forward for this reason. I'm not sure. I've heard some discussion that it is or it can be a problem.
Dustin, the language is it's at the very top, 429.1. 2. And that's just what the ICC had. If we want to change it to better match, whatever.
Katie?
What about instead of the charging infrastructure shall be reduced? And I'm not an electrical person, so, but instead going the, let's see, we increase the capable but reduce the parking spaces. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's still a possibility in the future. It's easy to hook up, but we get rid of or we reduce the 10% and increase the 40 so that it's still possible when and if the utility is able to provide that service.
I'm going to make a suggestion. I had hoped to get this proposal through today and finalized. At the same time, I know that we need to make progress on the embodied carbon proposal. And there are a couple of other miscellaneous items. We have 1 hour left. Patrick, there are 4 things that you mentioned that are still up for consideration, and I'm going to suggest maybe we table this until our next meeting to address those 4 items. Because I think some of them do take, they're going to take some thought, both how we would do it and if we should do it. So, the exception about if the utility can't provide 100% of the power, in my opinion, if there is making it clear that if a building exceeds one category, that it can count towards a lesser, that kind of makes sense to me. The R2, I will admit that I'm not as clear on dwelling units rather than parking spaces. I'd have to think through that. And then, your last item, I'm not sure of either. So I think my suggestion is, unless other people have different ideas, that we table this and know that we have those 4 items that we need to continue to discuss at the next meeting. And actually, Kathleen had her hand up and said she may have a comment or two. So unless I hear questions or concern, I'm going to suggest maybe that we have a 5-minute break. We table this, have a 5-minute break, and then come back where we start digging in a little bit on the embodied carbon proposal. Kathleen?
Thank you very much. Question would be, should we submit our comments in writing prior to that would be posted, perhaps, so folks have an opportunity to cruise through them before the next session?
I think that is ideal, and Dustin, that puts a little bit of pressure on you to get those things posted publicly, but I know that hang on just a minute. So Patrick, if you can, I know you had sent an email to a couple of us with your comments. If you could get those remaining comments to Dustin and he could post them, and then Kathleen, if you have comments, get them to Dustin and we will try to post them. I agree. Some of them take a little bit of time to think through and So email comments that you have to this combined proposal to Dustin for posting, and then we will try to pick this back up again at our next meeting. Patrick?
Would it be helpful if I suggest some potential code language to insert, or do
Yeah.
you just want the comments and then let the committee decide how to do it?
I think if you can go all the way to suggested comments, that's very helpful. Because part of it is it may be a good, makes sense, but all right, how do we do it? Where do we insert language? So, and Kathleen, it's the same if you have either comments on Patrick's suggestions or if you have suggestions of your own. I do think we're making great progress on it. I think we're coming up with some really good updates. So.
Thank you very much.
As a suggestion on some of that, I would like to ask that those comments come in relation to this BFRW proposal.
Yeah.
So looking, if we go to the page where these are posted at the moment, I'll get the 068 R2 one posted up there. But what I'd like to also offer up for everybody is that I can get the Word document that we're looking at here today posted up there pretty quick. In the wrong spot, I'm sorry. And if you take that Word document that I'll post up there and you can make the code change proposals or revisions there. I'm in the wrong spot again. Let me just get to the spot I want to go.
I was gonna say I had a little bit of trouble getting into it too. There you go.
Okay, so this is the EV charging page as is. Any revisions or code change suggestions that we get from proponents here, I'm gonna put the Word document in here in this line below the combined proposal. From today, it'll be combined proposal revision 1. Anything that is suggested, I'll put in here in line below those as suggested modifications, and we'll bring those back and we'll be linking this page to the meetings instead of posting all these documents to the meeting. One of the troubles we're having with our website right now is having things posted in multiple locations, and anytime we have to make the update to a document, we have to go to multiple locations. So I'm trying to get this to be the one-stop shop for the EV proposals as we continue to move them forward. And so I'll get the Word document posted up here today, and I'll as I get them in, I can get those posted same day. But I would ask that we try to get them in sooner than later, just so that we can have them here for folks to look at. And it's just ideas. If there's any other comments, questions on what we got going on, or if there's issues with links, the sooner I can find out about them. I'm doing my best to get them all up there and accurate as we develop these new pages. But if there's an issue, please point it out to me. I'm trying to make the corrections as I am made aware of them. And I do try to vet all this stuff as I get it out there, but there are mistakes made on occasion, and I want to make sure that we get them fixed as soon as possible for folks so that they can get the documents they need.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think that we're making great progress, and hopefully we can get through this. And so what I'm going to suggest is we take a 6-minute break and we come back at 11:15, and we will dig into the where we're at with the embodied carbon proposal.
I think you wanted to table this, and I don't think you did, just FYI.
Oh, all right. Do we need to vote on a table? Somebody help me with it.
Yeah, we should get a motion to table.
At 11:15, we'll get a motion to table and the table that and then jump in. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, I will call the meeting back to order. And as long as I can make sure that we have people back. I think we need Angela's back. It was brought to my attention that we should have a motion to table this combined proposal for the EV charging. So Could I have said motion?
I'll move to table this until the next meeting.
Thanks,
Second.
Tom. Thanks, Angela. Any discussion? All those in favor of tabling the EV charging, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Second, I do want to, there is some conversation I need to have before we move into the next, I'm trying to get the attendee list. Before we get into the next item, I do want to make sure we do have a deadline of either the June or July SBCC meeting for us to get these done, and I'll work with Dustin, but there is the possibility we may have to have an additional BFRW meeting or two. I'm not sure. My assumption is 2 weeks, May 23rd, maybe May 30, June, June 6th is a maybe. So there's some Friday mornings out there, and I'll have to work with Dustin on schedules and everything, but I think we're close on the EV charging. I know there's still a fair amount of work to do on the embodied carbon, so I appreciate everybody's commitment. We do have this deadline of either the June or July, so we'll work through that and we'll let everybody know. So with that, I think that it is time for us to bring up the embodied carbon proposal. I talked with Dustin. I know on the website there are 3 or 4 versions that are called R4 with comments. My plan for today is for us to get started on one of those comments or one of those documents. And we can start going through the comments and either, discussing the comments that people have had. And at the end of the day, we are going to take that document and convert it into a BFRW document, similar to the combined document that we have for the EV charging, so that there will be less confusion moving forward on what version that we are talking, that we are working on. I see a hand from Corey. Corey, go ahead and comment. If I'm hoping that I know you sent an email that you weren't sure. I'm hoping my plan is we can start going through comments and we will get the document, take charge of the documentation. So, but go ahead.
Thanks, Roger. I guess that's where my confusion is coming from, and I mentioned that in my testimony or my comments I sent in, because on April 11th, it was communicated to us, the public, that the committee would be working on those 4 versions of various comments and combining them into a document that would be available for us to review prior to this meeting today. And that was also echoed on the April 25th council meeting, that was the process that's going to be taking place, though we all knew which document we were going to be looking at, so we could all provide comments to that document. So if you're just going to randomly select one of those 4 today for us to go through, you're not going to capture everything on, in this, all the comments. So that's where we're having some trouble and confusion. So we're supposed to be working off of one document. And I have more commentary on this, but I can stick to that because that's what you brought up as far as the process.
Well, Corey, my first comment suggestion is all members on the committee that are working on this are volunteers who have day jobs as well. And in addition, the staff is short-staffed, so we are working through it as quickly as we can. I think that it had been our intent to take those documents and create what I'm going to call the BFRW proposal, which prior to this meeting, that didn't happen. So the best option for us to move forward is to take revision 4 that have the most comments included, and we can start talking about those comments, potentially resolving some of them. We will then convert that to, at the end of the meeting today, to the BFRW proposal. And so moving forward, there will not be any more, there shouldn't be any more confusion on which version we are working on. I'm fine to having us carry comments forward from some of the other versions, but we will, hopefully we have a version that includes all of the comments, and there's CLF has a couple version of comments. The Northwest Concrete Masonry Association has some. And I know that you're with WACA, right, Corey? Yeah, there are a list of comments that you sent. We will do our best to incorporate all of those comments.
So that will be done after today's discussion. You'll try to blend everything.
We will, yes.
Can you clarify which document you are going to be pulling up today for us to look at, so I can look at it and provide and track
Yeah.
along with you?
Dustin, you and I talked, is it which version that got posted has all or most of the comments?
I would be targeting the GP1 118 R4 CLF comments of version 4. The one thing I'm unclear on is if that version also includes the content from the CLF and Northwest Concrete Association comments in there. So I'm not sure how those two documents are all synthesized together, but I would say the version 4 is the one that I received last, and should have the most work done on it. But we have lots of folks who had been proposing those documents here. So, you know, if there's a need to open up another one, I have them all ready to open and view today. So as you know, for this meeting, there's potential to open up any of those documents that are on the embodied carbon page.
Dustin, the version 4 I just opened up does not have, we'll get to it here, does not have the comments off to the side. The CLF comments version 4. The comments are not, I'm not sure if they've been incorporated or not. And I see Ariel, Todd, if you can hold off a minute. Ariel, you're the proponent.
Hi, yeah, I'm double checking just to jog my memory, but if my memory serves me correctly, the document that combines CLF comments and the NWCMA comments is the most recent version 4 of CLF as well, and includes the comments. So I think that's the most comprehensive version to go off of. I'm double checking right now, but that's what I would recommend.
I also, Dustin, when I open up those versions, there are a number of comments off to the side. And so I am going to suggest that we do that. The CLF and Northwest Concrete Masonry Association comments. And for everybody, our intent is between either the people that made the comments or staff, we will try to, if there is a comment on one of the other versions, we will try to bring it over and or add it to this list. So so let's use that, the CLF and Northwest Concrete Masonry Association comments version. I've got a couple hands up, so Todd, go ahead.
Formatting question going forward, since this is an appendix in the code and not an existing WAC, maybe Dustin, do you want it in ICC template format? The other single exit and multiplex ones we received were in Seattle template. What works best for you? You're muted though.
So this is all going to be new language for our code this year for the 2024. And the Seattle language doesn't help us make the modification, but it's, you know, it's all going to be underlined text essentially in the end. So if there's a preference, I would prefer the ICC change format.
Okay.
But if I have received something in relation to the Seattle version, it wouldn't be hard to just convert it to underlined text.
Okay, well, I've started a Word document based off of the 2027 ICC template. And if that's acceptable, I'll keep contributing there, and maybe we can get BRFW versions in that format. Okay.
That works.
Okay.
And so what's on the screen here is the CLF and Northwest Concrete Masonry Association document. And then I have the other versions available if we want to pull them up side by side to look at anything that might be included in one of those versions. I'm prepared to do so.
Matthew, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I work for Cal Portland Company, where I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs, and I'm quite familiar with code, DPDs, etc. And I guess I want to kind of raise the question of fairness. I mean, this has been, the project proponent here has allowed the Carbon Leadership Forum and the Masonry Council to take the document, edit it, make changes, suggestions, but like we as an association have not had that opportunity. And we, at the end of the day, are the producers that have to implement and comply with these codes. We are the ones that are affected at the end of the day, and we've had no stake in being able to write or affect change in these codes. The only way we've been able to do is to make a change potentially is try to show up at these meetings, make comments, and hope that NBI and CLF change the words in the document. So, and leading up to today's meeting, Corey and I both attempted to make comments on these documents, but we couldn't even download the document. So I just raised the whole question of fairness to the people at the end of the day who have to implement these codes. Like, we really haven't had a stake in the development of the code.
Well, Matthew, I will comment. Number one, we can debate whether it's a code or not because it's an appendix. Number two, we have been discussing this proposal since October or November of last year at many building code tag meetings. So the idea that we have not had that there has not been the ability to comment or impact any change, I wouldn't agree with. Has there been did we not follow up in the last month on trying to get a single version? Yes, I admit that. I have admitted that already. The goal is for us to combine all of the comments and have a clear version that we are continuing to work on moving forward. So the inability to comment on the overall code language, we have been working on it since, I don't know exactly when we started, but there have been many opportunities to contribute at those meetings. So. All right. Any other hands up? Tim Atterbury.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of speak, not necessarily to the fairness of it, but just sort of why are we here? Are we here just because someone proposed it? And it has been a lengthy process. I want to, last meeting, I mentioned that Craig Holt with Anderson Construction, they did a pilot project that included EPDs at a project at the University of Washington Tacoma branch. And I wanted to just read, it's a quick paragraph, but I just wanted to read a paragraph that Craig, who worked on the project, wrote to me before he passed away 6 months ago. And I think that the numbers, and just because we have someone here that actually went through an EPD project, I think it's valuable. So just hang with me here. I'm going to read a paragraph that Craig wrote to me before he passed away. He kind of says, quote, "My experience so far has been limited to the pilot we did at UW Tacoma, where the project had to pay our mass timber supplier $35,000 and the steel fabricator $50,000 that was not previously budgeted. As I understand the EPD requirement, this will be typical situation of the custom nature of the products. Of all things, I would have thought that the wood for mass timber would have not required cost, but we found that not to be the case. In addition, it will consume roughly 60 to 70 staff hours on the construction side to manage the process and to report to the UW group overseeing the process. UW has created a special group just to do this, which consists of several full-time employees at some significant cost. Craig kind of goes on to say the contrived gauges of carbon footprint and global warming potential are arbitrary, without peer review, and damage any real effort to help the environment, but they are now part of the conversation just because of the constant use and repetition. Craig goes on to say, this is not a venture free of cost, and the benefits appear to be of little real consequence. So I want to put that out there, just maybe to pump the brakes on this process completely, because we have, Craig served with you guys on the State Building Code Council. We have someone who went through an EPD project and just sort of says, for the regulated entities, it was a negative process, and that UW had to hire several employees just to manage it. And so wanted to put that out there. And then, Craig, I guess at some point in the project, he had to use mass timber. And like I said, if you do the math there real quick, there's $85,000 that wasn't in his bid that he had to pay, and I guess that the steel fabricator and the mass timber supplier ended up, I don't know if these are fines or these are extra things they have to pay, but the costs are real, and the work for the construction company, it is a big mandate to take one of your employees off of what they're doing and have them work 60 to 70 hours just to manage the process. So
Tim, if I can cut you off, I
Sure.
appreciate the information. It's the same information that you presented last meeting that we had.
No, it's new.
My first comment is, when was this project done?
I think it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, I'm going to tell you 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't be surprised if there were questions about what EPDs are. Any projects that would potentially get built under this appendix this appendix is not going to be adopted until at least the fall of 2026, and I would suggest a year after that, because it will take that long for any municipality that might adopt it. And so we're talking about almost a 10-year difference from when the information you talked about, this data that you're talking about and this experience happened to when a project might be built under this potential appendix. So
yeah, not opposed to bringing new information to the table. It's just the one piece of information I had from a member who was active and on the State Building Code Council that provided to me just before he passed.
Thank you. Todd?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we just need to focus on the merits of this. This is an external petition. It went through the TAG process, went through this committee once, went to the council. The council put it back down because it's a complex issue, and there are a lot of externalities to this right now. So thank you for the feedback on process, but the council has given direction on process, and we are doing our work in the committee to understand this better and to ground it in scope with the other processes that are happening by clean efforts with legislative policy. So this is just not a simple petition. So that's why we're discussing it here. And I think we should talk about the merits of the proposal.
Thank you, Todd. Corey?
Thanks, Roger. I did want to kind of touch a little bit on some of what Tim had said, some of what even Todd had mentioned. If you bring in Buy Clean, Buy Fair, you're talking about a working group that's taking place right now with Commerce that's looking at EPDs. And the reason why they're doing that is because there's new data coming out on products and materials and innovations that are changing EPDs and changing the way those EPDs are weighted, calculated, and presented. So I do feel like this proposal is premature. The International Building Code Council unanimously voted it down last week as a premature document with some concerns with terminology. They didn't agree that it was suitable for setting GWP limits. And they also don't feel that this belongs in a building code They believe it belongs in a green code like the IGCC. They also indicated there are still some significant changes that were needed. There was inconsistencies in the document and a gap in the training that would be required for the expectations of the building officials and local municipalities who upload it. And currently that's not clarified in the document. And there's some scoping issues and some stakeholdering issues and lacking. And so we've had conversations with like our national associations like NRMCA. They indicate that the data that Washington has is based on like the top 5 performing businesses and companies within Washington. And as we are doing research through the 1282 working group, we're polling some of those other members that didn't participate in that and finding the ability to bring better data and better information forward. So my suggestion and my wish would be that we, as a community, decide that we're going to take the time to do the research and build a document that's in some language that's going to work for Washington. And that starts with EPD evaluation, which is currently happening with 1282. So I still think this is premature, and this IBC believes the same thing.
Thank you. Matthew?
Well, I just wanted to bring a little more information to the table, sort of in real time. You know, we deal in a lot of sophisticated projects as a company, and while this code isn't in effect, we are dealing with project owners that want us to meet targets below benchmarks. And you know, there's currently a project out there where no producer in the region can meet the values that the entity wants. It's a Sound Transit project. So, I mean, my concern about code like this is that there's no safeguards for us as operators. There's no off ramps because for situations where we can't you know, meet the specs. It's one thing to sit here and write this proposal and put it into the language, but we have to implement it and be able to produce and meet the limits. And I'm just going to say it so that you all know, when we make lower carbon concrete, we achieve that by adding in SCMs, which are primarily slag in the Northwest. That material is shipped into the region from the Far East. So from an accounting standpoint, slag accounts for 0 in the calculation of our EPD for concrete, but there's only so much slag you can put in a mix. And not all mix designs can use high percentages of slags, especially like PT decks. So when we're building the project, we jam as much slag as we can into footing work and foundation work, because we know we can't use as much in the decks and the other parts of the building. So they're a real world, like we cannot always meet benchmarks below standards. And if you're going to move ahead with a piece of code like this, there needs to be safeguards for industry and for the job owner so that projects can get done.
I'm going to call on Amy and Tim, and then I am probably going to, we haven't made any progress. And if we need to modify our meetings to be clear on when we have committee discussion and conversations and when we have public comment, I think that we may need to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and let Amy and Tim chat, and then we will probably need to move on. So Amy, go ahead.
Thank you, Amy Lewis, New Buildings Institute. I just wanted to briefly provide some clarification on how Corey characterized our reception at the IBC. Any proposal receiving any comments for addressing comments or providing modification receives a disapproval in order for that work to be done. So that vote does not represent it's not a vote of confidence or an indicator of the vote of confidence. And we received some feedback that the question of scope actually doesn't fit with that body, but with the board. And so we are exploring how to resolve the question of scope so that it doesn't continue to go back and forth. And thirdly, just reiterating, as we've said before, that Ariel and I at NBI are genuinely open to working together on revising values. We want the values to be feasible and fair. And we intend to continue to modify during the available period. Thank you.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, just adding more history to this. I vaguely remember 2 or 3 years ago, the State Building Code Council said no to EPDs. I think it was at the committee process. So I think this is 2 or 3 years ago, went through the tag process, came to a committee. I can't remember if it was this one or not, but the committee said no. The state legislature a couple times has said no. And so it just seems like we're refighting battles that we've fought in the past. And it's sort of, I just think that when you have that many judges say no, maybe we don't need to be looking at this. It's been reviewed and reviewed and reviewed, highly controversial, and generally speaking, public policy making bodies in Washington state say no.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to ask the committee members, we've got 20 minutes left, and I know that we have a couple of other action items. What I would like to get officially moved forward out of the committee today is clarity on the version that we're going to use and the process we're going to go through. So I would, I guess, entertain a motion that we didn't get to this the version that is up on the table, the revision 4 CLF plus Northwest Concrete Masonry Association. I would entertain a motion that we take this version and ask Dustin to create this as the BFRW version that we move forward and that gets published on the website so that we can have meaningful discussion at our next meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Katie, thanks, Angela. Is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, I am going to move us on to agenda item number 7, other business. And let me see. Dustin, I know that can you introduce the idea, the question that came to this group from the MVPE committee?
Yes, give me one moment here. So, we didn't have any interpretations posed for this group, but we did have one coming through for the MVPE committee, which will be meeting next Monday. The question for them is, how should an assembly be insulated in a concrete stress panel structure? The issue there is, what value of insulation is needed there. But then it kind of crosses the territory into IBC definitions and IRC definitions for what is a vertical wall. And so before that body makes a determination on that opinion to come out, they wanted to get some clarification from this group on the IBC definition of vertical wall. So just real quick, this is the draft that's prepared for that meeting coming up Monday. And the question at hand is, the use of alternative building options has increased, such as stress skin panels and berm housing. The main issue is how you determine which sections of these structures are required to meet which assembly requirements. There's no clear guidance in the code beyond the definition of vertical versus non-vertical glazing. Before I get to the draft answer, let me pop open the email we received from them and show you some pictures because they're worth 1,000 words. So this is the type of structure they're looking at. At what point does this become wall insulation or ceiling insulation for a scenario similar to this? We have a lot of earth covering the back side of it. The particular cross section we're looking at doesn't indicate how, if that earth comes all the way down on the right hand side of this picture. But the question at hand is what is a vertical wall and what constitutes a ceiling? And so if I skip back to the prepared answer, the IBC does define an exterior wall as having a slope of 60 degrees or greater from horizontal. And then it further goes on to talk about what the energy code offers for those particular assemblies moving forward. And they wanted to get some buy-off that the interpretation for the walls is accurate and approvable by this group. And then if needed, it can also go to the full council at next week's meeting, but we're hoping to reduce some load on that meeting by keeping the opinions moving in the committees.
Okay, are there, I will just say that the answer seems reasonable to me, although I will need to spend a little bit of time looking through it. Are there other comments?
Dustin, what's the main question here from the city? It's the interpretation for the energy code.
Yeah, they're asking what insulation values are going to be required where in essentially a domed structure.
Okay,
How would the forces be calculated if it were an engineering problem? I mean, maybe there's an answer there.
being the structural engineer, I would suggest you would probably analyze that as a radius. It's not going to be a wall that's thought of as a straight. Typically, you do it as a straight wall, and you don't include the radial stresses from, theoretically, there would be no tension because everything is in compression. That's the reason you use the dome analysis. So I think that it would need to be analyzed not as a straight number. So the whole 60 degree, I think picking a line is probably the intent, or as makes as much sense as anything. But again, it's a good question, Tom, and I'm shooting off shooting from the hip. I think the 60 degrees kind of makes sense, but I would have to do a little bit of digging myself.
Because it seems like it would change to 60 degrees pretty quick, depending on the radius.
Yeah.
After it stops being vertical.
And I don't know the impact to that. What the ceiling insulation is probably heavier than the wall, but I don't even know, I'm not up on the energy code, so.
Well, the R values are typically larger for the ceiling components.
Yeah.
But then if you have, more than 24 inches of earth on top, so we've got, below grade wall requirements that can reduce the insulation requirement a little bit there. But it's a little bit of a complex situation. And so they want to know at what point does the wall become the ceiling is the real question.
So this is going to be addressed Monday at the energy code.
That is the hope. They'll be discussing it, but it may not go all the way to the end there, and it may need to come to the council on Friday next week.
Does it timing wise? Is there a reason that it couldn't wait a month or two. I mean, if we don't have time at the council meeting on Friday.
I'm not aware of any imminent need, but we do try to get them out as expeditiously as possible.
I will just suggest that you, and I don't know, Dustin, how you distribute this information, but make sure that both what's up on the screen and that email gets sent at least to all of this committee members. If it needs to get issued to the public, then issue it publicly. And then we, as a group, if we can do a little bit of investigating and at least be ready to offer some thoughts at the council meeting next Friday, if it comes up, we can educate ourselves before that meeting. Tom?
Yeah, I think also having a little more clarity on how much earth cover is on, the entire structure would play into it too, right? Because if we determine that the whole radius is ceiling, but then the whole radius is either totally or partially covered with 24 inches of earth, then everything changes again.
Yeah. It is pretty complicated. Okay, if there are no other comments, let's see, other business, Dustin, help me out here.
There was potential for a WUI code is what we were talking about during the agenda.
Yes, Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So this is just more of an update and wanted to run it by everybody. But after the council meeting, I was thinking about the WUI code and kind of liking what was discussed about taking the expertise in that group and Dustin, I meant to call you before this to sort of give you a heads up, but here it is. That perhaps I would reach out to Representative Doer, who was the sponsor of it was
the most recent WUI code bill.
Yeah, 1254. And kind of proposed that we work together on maybe reviving this bill with the expertise of the WUI tag. And then also reaching out, of course, eventually to the other sponsors and the other representatives and senators on our committee and sort of try to get something ready for the WUI code when the maps come out in January next year. So that was my plan. I have not done any of that yet. And I just wanted to sort of put that out there for everybody in case maybe Tom, I would love your feedback as the chair of the legislative committee and just sort of see where we're at with that so that I wasn't taking action without everybody knowing. So
yeah, it does kind of blend into what the legislative committee might be doing, and discussing those types of things with the legislators. I think personally, that it's a good move though, to try and coordinate with those who, have that stake in it at the legislative level to, make sure that whatever we do, if we can move forward, that we're moving forward in the direction that is supportable. So.
Well, and Angela raised some good points about like what are in the last meeting at the council meeting, just that, what is our role and what do we have authority to do? And it would just be nice to work together on this so that we're not in conflict from the jump. So Tom, if this is amenable to everybody, and Todd, you were going to say something, I jumped ahead of you, but I would kind of just include you, Tom, and you, Todd, in sort of the initial outreach, if with your permission, and go from there. And anybody else that's interested, of course, just to see where Representative Doer might suggest we go with it.
I'd support that. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, I think I really like the idea, and I actually think it applies to the WUI code. I think it could apply to the embodied carbon effort, and I think it could apply to the single exit and multiplex as it gets going. Maybe I should say differently. I think they all could benefit from some sort of mechanism engaging with the legislature, especially in the interim. I don't know what the model is, but I think that's what we're talking about, and I think it's a good idea. And I guess going further on that, it's because often we wait for a mandate on some of these issues, but really the best process could be a combination of rulemaking and policy making together, coordinated. I think this is one of those.
That would be the hope, especially since we have a little bit of time and we don't have a clear use for the tag at this point. I think getting their feedback, I hope that my thought would be that you know, any legislation that comes into being would benefit from their expertise. So I'll reach out. We'll go from there with it sounds like there's some support for that, and we'll see where it goes. And if needed, I will just keep everybody updated on how that's going, either here or at the council meeting, wherever that makes sense.
Okay. Katie, I do want to make two things. When you start distributing information or sending emails, just be careful of how many council members, so we don't get into the Open Public Meetings Act concern. But yes, coordinate and let's get that, whether it's through the executive committee. So I agree with that. And then I also want to make sure this is the BFRW standing committee. And I realize that our agenda has been pretty stocked full of building code questions right now, but I do want to make sure that this group is there to help support you as we move forward. So
just quickly, so that it's we don't want more than 7 people on the call. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Or the email? I mean, would you like me to add you to that, given that it's only 3 of us at this point?
I don't know. I don't need to be on, and I am not sure I can take on another deep issue with the single exit and the current issues of course.
Sure.
That we're currently facing. So.
All right. Well, at this point, it's just the 3 of us, and Dustin, of course, I'll touch bases with you about this as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. We
You
have
look like you had something, or Tom, you look like you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, I was just going to say something real quick with the open public meetings thing. You know, passively receiving information doesn't necessarily start a meeting as long as you don't react to it.
Yeah, one of the methods I use if I need to get stuff out to everybody, I use the blind CC option. That way, if somebody does hit the reply all button, it doesn't create that serial chain of communication. And I just wanted to say that also at this juncture, we still have 3 vacancies on the council, so that limit of 7 is we need to be below 6 at this moment.
Thank you. That's good to know.
All right, was there any additional other business? Failed to write a list, but don't necessarily think so. So with that, I am going to move that we close today's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Or I am closing it. I never know how to close the meeting. I'm declaring the meeting closed. How's that?
Adjourned.
That works. Thank you, everybody.